Tonight, the widow of a volunteer firefighter receives a bravery award on his behalf.
There are fine people in this world, but none finer than someone like Sam, who gives of themselves and pays the ultimate price.
Also tonight, the former sports minister rejects growing calls for an inquiry into pre-election grants to sports clubs in marginal seats. Donald Trump's impeachment trial begins with more damaging claims against the president. And pure joy as creeks flow for the first time in years and koalas saved not from fires but from heavy rain. Good evening, Mary Gearin with ABC News. Hundreds have gathered to honour the life of a volunteer firefighter killed when a fire tornado flipped over his truck. Samuel McPaul died while battling the massive Green Valley blaze near Albury last month. The 28-year-old is one of 6 firefighters killed in the New South Wales and Victorian fires. Michaela Ortolin reports from Holbrook.
Hard-working, compassionate and a true friend, Samuel McPaul was remembered as a hero.
Sam would give you the shirt off his back if he thought it could help in any way and never expected anything in return.
When Sam entered a room, his contagious smile would instantly lift the spirits of people on its receiving end, and his deep, loud laugh was truly infectious.
The Holbrook Sports Centre was overflowing with mourners, paying their respects to the volunteer firefighter who tragically lost his life last month.
It is so difficult for all of us to comprehend the enormity of what unfolded that night. The ferocity and the intensity of those winds was such that it effectively flipped over a 10-tonne firefighting tanker.
The 28-year-old has been a member of the RFS for over a decade. The service heard he was a lover of animals, passionate about basketball and committed to giving back to the community.
There are fine people in this world, but none finer than someone like Sam, who gives of themselves and pays the ultimate price.
His wife Megan accepted a bravery award on his behalf. The couple only married 18 months ago, with their first child due in May.
Sam's bub is going to grow up hearing the many stories about their dad and know how special they are to have had such an amazing man as their father.
In a final farewell, a guard of honour was formed as helicopters flew overhead.
Your final act of bravery has touched the lives of thousands across this country and the world.
Honouring a man whose legacy will live on. Michaela Ortolin, ABC News, Holbrook.
And the father and son killed while fighting the Kangaroo Island bushfires have been farewelled in an emotional service in Adelaide. 2 planes flew overhead as hundreds of mourners gathered to pay tribute to 78-year-old Outback pilot Dick Lang and his 43-year-old son Clayton Lang. Dick Lang was remembered as a pioneer of outback tourism and larger than life.
I'll be forever grateful for him instilling in me a sense of adventure and an appreciation of the wonders of nature. He led an extraordinary life, and even his death was extraordinary. I still can't quite believe it.
Clayton Lang was remembered as a respected hand surgeon, instrumental to the treatment of advanced melanoma and skin cancer. He's survived by 2 young daughters. Deputy Nationals leader Bridget McKenzie is staring down the prospect of a parliamentary inquiry into her involvement in a grants program that handed $100 million to sports clubs around the country. An investigation has found it appeared to favour marginal and other targeted seats ahead of the election. But the senator is refusing to step down, insisting everything was above board. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
Out of Canberra, but still in the spotlight.
How do you justify your choices here?
The Deputy Nationals leader can't escape questions about her handling of the contentious community sports grants program.
All local members, Labor, Liberal, National Party, Independent, appreciated the investment into their local clubs.
She made political decisions.
Hi Bridget, how are you going?
An Auditor General's report has raised serious questions about the integrity of the grants process, finding the then Sports Minister ignored advice from Sport Australia and gave millions of dollars to clubs not originally earmarked for cash.
Every single project that received funding was eligible to receive it.
Analysis of the grants show the most marginal seats which received the most funding included Boothby in South Australia, Corangamite and Indi in Victoria, Eden Monaro in New South Wales and Dawson in North Queensland. One of the successful clubs there is North Queensland Football, which received more than $360,000 to improve its Townsville facilities.
We don't get involved with any side of politics. We're here to grow the game.
The prestigious Mossman Rowing Club on Sydney's North Shore was given $500,000 in April. It didn't help the local member get over the line at the May election, and his successes assessment?
We just seem to have this focus on personal gain and the moral compass just seems to be lost.
The government argues Labor electorates also benefited greatly.
If a minister wants to cover themselves and take out some insurance, they'll give a couple of grants in electorates from the other side.
You can't tell me one tennis club is more meritorious than another.
But therein lies the problem, with the minister and her office using their own criteria to award some of these grants. The allegation is they have deemed some clubs more deserving. And when politicians return to the capital next month, you can expect to see the Senate attempt to launch its own inquiry into this saga.
Australian people are sick and tired of pork barrelling by politicians and looking after their own nest egg.
And they'll be hoping she cracks under parliamentary pressure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
For just the third time in history, an impeachment trial of an American president has begun in the US Senate. Donald Trump has been summoned to answer 2 charges, and a key figure in the scandal went public with more damaging claims about the Commander-in-Chief. North America correspondent James Glenday reports.
This was a moment that'll live forever in America's history books. The head of the country's highest court was sworn in.
So help you God.
I do.
So too the senators who will effectively serve as the jury.
Do you solemnly swear?
And the Democratic politicians prosecuting the case against Donald Trump formally put the 45th president on trial.
You could feel the weight of the moment. I saw members on both sides of the aisle visibly gulp.
The Commander-in-Chief has now been summoned to answer 2 charges. The first states he abused the powers of the presidency by pressuring Ukraine to announce investigations that could have helped him politically ahead of this year's election. The second alleges he then tried to cover it all up.
This thing is a big hoax. It's a big hoax. We call it, this is the current hoax.
But former members of the president's orbit keep contradicting his blanket denials. Lev Parnas, a Soviet-born businessman who's facing criminal charges, says he worked with Mr. Trump's personal lawyer to pressure Ukrainian officials.
President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements.
And this morning, a federal watchdog accused the president's team of breaking the law by withholding military aid from Kiev as leverage.
Embarrassing as those developments may be for the White House, they're almost certainly not going to change the outcome of this historic trial. Mr. Trump's Republican colleagues control the numbers in the Senate, and senior administration officials here again today declared they're hopeful the president will be acquitted quickly, perhaps within 2 to 3 weeks. James Glenday, ABC News, Washington.
5 countries whose citizens were killed when Iranian forces shot down a passenger plane have called for Tehran to pay compensation to the victims' families. While Iran has admitted one of its missiles was responsible, it's under pressure to do more for the investigation and help identify and repatriate the victims. Middle East correspondent Adam Harvey reports from Beirut.
The foreign ministers from 5 nations mourn their citizens killed when a Ukrainian plane was shot down. The ministers from Canada, Britain, Ukraine, Sweden and Afghanistan want Iran to make amends. Iran's belated admission of guilt is not enough for the families and friends of the 176 people on board.
When you accept full responsibility, there's consequences coming from that, and that's what we're going to be pursuing.
The foreign ministers are demanding that their experts and diplomats take part in the investigation. And they say Iran should compensate the victims' families.
Compensation flows directly from the full admission of responsibility by the Iranian government.
While hoping to stitch together cooperation on the plane investigation, European governments are also watching the Iran nuclear deal unravel. Since the US killed its top general, Iran has vowed to ramp up activities meant to be curtailed by the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, including uranium enrichment.
Today, as I stand here in front of you, we have no limits on nuclear energy. Absolutely none.
The European signatories to the nuclear deal say Iran is out of line, and they've begun a process that could result in new sanctions being slapped on Tehran.
Now the Europeans have decided, in order to hide their inability to perform, to take those measures. I don't think they have any standing in JCPOA to do that.
The US and its allies hope that increasing the pressure on Iran will somehow make it less dangerous. But so far, that's not happening. The Middle East is less safe than ever, and the downing of Flight 752 is an example of what can go wrong in a more volatile region. Adam Harvey, ABC News, Beirut.
An Australian Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, says she's spoken with her Iranian counterpart about the fate of an Australian academic imprisoned in Tehran. Ms Payne discussed Dr Kiley Gilbert's detention with Foreign Minister Javad Zarif on the sidelines of a security conference in New Delhi. The Melbourne University lecturer has begged the Australian government for support after being sentenced to 10 years in prison for spying.
This is not a detention that we support. We don't accept the charges upon which she is convicted and now held. We've made that case to Iranian authorities.
Ms Payne says Dr Gilbert has had recent consular visits at Tehran's notorious Evin prison, where she's been held since October. Prince Harry has attended his first public engagement since announcing he'll be stepping back from senior royal duties. The Duke of Sussex hosted the draw for next year's Rugby League World Cup and met with children in the gardens of Buckingham Palace. Details of his new role are still unclear, but the Queen has said she wants a final decision within days. The Duke will reportedly stay in the UK for meetings next week before he rejoins wife Meghan and son Archie in Canada. The family of a little girl who went missing for 24 hours in the remote north of Western Australia is celebrating their hero puppy that stayed with her until help arrived. 3-year-old Matilda was found after a massive land and air search. There were serious fears because heavy rain had left flooding in the area. The child, with Jack Russell puppy Wolfie by her side, had wandered away from the homestead on the pastoral station. A day later, a helicopter pilot found Matilda unhurt. Wolfie is believed to have stayed by her side during the night. Matilda's family have praised the puppy on social media, describing him as the goodest boy. Police are on the hunt for a man who fired a gun in an attempted carjacking at Vermont South in Melbourne's east. A 56-year-old man was stopped at traffic lights on the Burwood Highway just before 11 o'clock this morning when a man approached him. When the driver refused to get out of his car, police say the man fired a shot through the window and ran away. A Melbourne tram strike will target tennis fans attending the Australian Open. Yarra Trams and the Andrews government have slammed the Rail, Tram and Bus Union for deliberately planning a strike during the tournament. The union says it comes after 9 months of fruitless negotiations over pay and conditions. State political reporter Bridget Rollison has this story.
The Australian Open is expected to bring more than 500,000 people to Melbourne, but there are concerns the city might not cope. Tram drivers will stop work for 4 hours on 2 days during the tennis finals because of an ongoing dispute with Yarra Trams.
An action during the Australian Open is obviously designed at hurting the people and causing pain.
The union wants a 5% pay rise, but says its biggest concern is job security. Yarra Trams has plans to make 15% of its workforce part-time to make the roster more flexible.
The part-time ratio being increased for us will slash our members' conditions at work and also take-home salary.
Plans for alternative transport will be released next week, but Yarra Trams says it will most likely provide buses.
This is an international event, and in the middle of it, we've got an embarrassing 2-day strike action. And what's the response from the minister? Silence.
It's the 4th strike by tram drivers in 5 months. The state government has said it's tried to stay out of the dispute, saying it's a matter for Yarra Trams. But the union says it's reached a stalemate and wants the government to intervene.
On June 30, I called up the minister and said, I'm not sure we're getting anywhere with this multinational, greedy, arrogant company. I think we need assistance.
But I think the community would have every right to feel pretty unhappy about behaviour that is essentially putting at risk a substantial tourism event for the state.
Yarra Tram says it's offered to meet with union officials every day of next week to try to reach an agreement. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
There's an emergency fire warning for the Buffalo River in northern Victoria. The fire is currently in Nug Nug Reserve Road and Jurisiches Road and is travelling north up the Buffalo Valley. And authorities say it's too late to leave and the safest option is to shelter indoors. Elsewhere, it's a very different story, with large areas of New South Wales and Queensland that had been struck by drought and bushfires now drenched by significant amounts of rain. Parched wildlife was enjoying the first rain in months. The heavy downpours did bring flash flooding to some areas, and there were reports of creeks that hadn't flowed for years filling with water. Some of the heaviest falls in New South Wales were in the Hunter region, 112 millimetres at Beulah-Dilla overnight, its heaviest rain in more than 2 years. Farmers are elated. Widespread showers and storms dumped between 30 and 150 millimetres across parts of Queensland. Follow-up falls are needed to bring an end to the drought, with firefighters warning the patchy falls may not be enough to extinguish all the fires. The small town of Buchan was one of the worst hit in the East Gippsland fires. 24 homes were destroyed and one local lost his life. Residents are trying to get their lives back on track, but the town's biggest tourism drawcard, the Buchan Caves, remain closed and money is drying up fast. Sarah Maunder has the story.
You think you're going to stay and defend in your honour? Yeah.
It's Thursday night in Buchan, and the local football club is hosting a social event, allowing weary residents to kick the footy and have a beer and a chat.
Normality is the biggest thing, and sporting clubs and local communities go hand in hand, and it's great to get back around everybody and shake hands and catch up and just have a bit of a chat about everything and so show the support.
Residents of the tiny Gippsland community are still coming to terms with the devastating fires that threatened the town just before New Year's. And getting back to normal is proving difficult for businesses here.
This is going to be a long and protracted recovery. So we will be here for our communities with that.
There's no tourists and residents are using donated goods rather than shopping locally.
Some are doing okay because they're dealing with the CFA and the DELP. We've got others like our general store and other small businesses like we've got a fellow that does contracting work. They're the ones that are struggling.
A question mark still hangs over Buchan's greatest tourist drawcard, the Buchan Caves. It was closed by Parks Victoria as a precaution, and it's still not clear whether the caves themselves have been damaged.
Well, we can't really determine that yet. There is a possibility, there could be smoke damage and that in there, but part of it is making sure we can get access there.
Buchan still has a long way to go.
Having a chat to a few people before training tonight really cemented that, and they spoke about how the terrible events really brought everybody closer together, if anything.
But this community has made a swift recovery its goal. Sarah Maunder, ABC News, Buchan.
When fires tore through the New South Wales south coast recently, one came perilously close to destroying the former home of the famous Australian artist Arthur Boyd. The painter gave his historic property Bundanon to the nation in 1993, including its significant art collection. The close shave has now prompted trustees to move the entire $43 million collection to Sydney. Here's National Arts reporter Michaela Boland.
One of Australia's most acclaimed painters, the late Arthur Boyd, adored the Shoalhaven River, home for much of his later life. His Shoalhaven paintings are among his most sought after. They were some of the thousands which came under fire threat this summer.
On the 3rd of January, we realised that the flames were coming really close. They're only about 1 kilometre from the Bundanon homestead site, and we obviously had a lot of artwork still here stored.
Bundan Trust made the unprecedented decision to move its most valuable artworks into city storage.
All these Sydney Nolan colonial pictures have all gone as well, so the house is pretty much empty.
Hours later, fire swept through the property's outskirts. Now, the rest of the collection is being evacuated.
The whole collection is 3,800 artworks by Arthur Boyd, Boyd family members, Boyd's colleagues and so on, Sydney Nolan, Charles Blackman.
This is Bundan's fire vault, built to house artworks in the event of a bushfire. But given the intensity of the current season, it's no longer considered up to the task. Next month, construction will begin on a $30 million art gallery and storage at an adjoining property.
It will be built subterranean, it will be underground, so the risk of fire will be eliminated basically.
The Bushfire Building Council of Australia says there is no best practice to protect the nation's cultural institutions, and the ferocity of this fire season has revealed their vulnerability. Bundan will reopen to the public soon, but for at least the remainder of this fire season, most of its artworks will be elsewhere. Michaela Boland, ABC News.
To finance now, and confirmation that China's economy has been weakened by the trade war failed to dampen enthusiasm for Australian shares. The market kicked on, climbing further into record territory. Here's Philip Lasker.
It's not only the bushfires that have attracted world attention, our all-conquering stock market is turning heads as well. Only 2 negative days this month so far. That's the best streak in more than 2 years. Not even confirmation that China had recorded its weakest economic growth in 29 years could derail the Australian market. This was the expected confirmation that the trade war had made its mark. China's GDP result weighed on other markets in the region, but Australia took its lead from Wall Street. Tech sector shares rallied in the US, with Alphabet, owners of Google, the newest trillion-dollar juggernaut, joining Apple and Microsoft as the biggest companies on Wall Street. IT stocks like Appen are also behind the Aussie market's record run, but so are telcos and healthcare stocks, not the traditional banking and mining giants that usually define the market. There were more climate casualties today. Agricultural supplies company Nufarm was smashed after warning its profits could be halved by drought and offshore competition. Rio Tinto reported a 3% drop in iron ore shipments last year. Here are some recent indicators of the bushfire fallout. In Sydney, from mid-December to mid-January, the number of rooms available increased, but demand and revenue fell. It was much worse outside Sydney, though. Within 2 hours' drive of the city centre, revenue dived more than 10%, which is a big hit. There's about $2 million in lost revenue in Sydney and surrounds so far. Not much happening on the currency front. The Australian dollar continues to hover around 69 US cents, and that's finance.
In tennis, world number 1 Ash Barty is tonight playing for a place in the final of the Adelaide International. The Australian progressed to the semi-finals with a convincing straight sets victory. And today, Ukraine teenager Diana Yastremska booked her place in the decider.
After a scratchy start to the summer, Ash Barty returned to form in her quarter-final in Adelaide.
That's nasty.
Up against the opponent she overwhelmed in last year's French Open final, Marketa Vondrousova, Barty showed off her range of strokes. The Australian eased to a 6-3, 6-3 win.
And that'll do it.
It's getting better and better. I think there are still times in the match where I want it to be a little bit tighter and a little bit more clinical, but all in all, it's really nice to be back here.
Barty has rebounded well after suffering a shock first-up loss at the Brisbane International. Veteran Sam Stosur says playing a home summer as the great Australian hope is challenging.
There's that extra spotlight expectation and everything else that comes along with it, but I think ultimately you've got to be more concerned and more focused on what you want to try and achieve and really narrow it down to, point by point.
But she thinks the 23-year-old is well positioned to handle it.
Ash has handled her whole, ride to this position very well, and I don't see why that's going to stop now.
Barty will play American Danielle Collins tonight. The winner will take on world number 24 Diana Yastremska in the final. The Ukrainian mixed brutal power with some nice touches to beat 6th seed Arina Sabalenka in straight sets.
Oh, so good. What a get and a wonderful finish.
In the men's draw, South African qualifier Lloyd Harris won through to the final, beating American Tommy Paul in 3 sets. He'll play the winner of tonight's semi-final between Felix Auger-Aliassime and Andrei Rublev. Peter Lusted, ABC News.
In AFL, Collingwood ruckman Brodie Grundy has signed a 7-year deal with the club. The 2-time All-Australian ruckman has agreed to stay with Magpies until the end of the 2027 season. There'd been speculation Brodie would return to his hometown of Adelaide, as the South Australian would have been eligible for free agency at the end of this year. The 25-year-old resisted the temptation because of his relationship with coach Nathan Buckley.
Bucks was really the first person I told. Sort of went around to his house and had a ham and cheese sandwich and told him that I was staying. So, yeah, that's the sort of relationships that I have at the footy club, and a big reason why I decided to stay.
Young stars Jordan De Goey and Darcy Moore are both coming out of contract at the end of 2020, leaving Collingwood in a tricky salary cap position. And Richmond coach Damien Hardwick has lashed out over rumours surrounding the departure of Alex Rance. The star defender announced his shock retirement last month, despite 2 years left on his contract. Hardwick was at a media conference discussing his role as coach of the Victorian team in next month's State of Origin bushfire relief match. He says the rumours surrounding Rance's personal life are false and disappointing.
That's what people do. I think they sit there and they hide behind keyboards and it's weak. There's no truth to it. There's nothing to it. This man is a man that's been devoted to his family and his faith for a long period of time, and there's nothing more sinister than that.
Hardwick says the door remains ajar for Rance to possibly return one day. And an update on that carjacking story in Vermont South. Police say after extensive investigations, the allegations made were not accurate. And they say they've spoken with the man who made the allegations and he may be charged with making a false report. Now to the weather, and this photo was taken at sunrise with the comment, "Nice reflections, but not much sun." That changed this afternoon. Blue skies to end your Friday. It was pretty cool for summer this morning in a lot of places, as low as 0 on Mount Baw Baw. The state's northeast was hottest again today, with 34 at Albury-Wodonga and Rutherglen, a few light showers around Gippsland. It warmed up rapidly after lunch to hit 24.8 in Melbourne City at 3:24 p.m, and right now outside it's dropped back to 21. It's been bucketing down in Sydney today, not that anyone's complaining. 61 millimetres has hit the ground. Darwin's had 21 mils. In both cases, thunderstorms were in the mix. We had low cloud over southern Victoria this morning, but it mostly cleared this afternoon. A pressure trough will drift over our west tomorrow, then deepen on Sunday as an upper low approaches. On Monday, a cut-off low will have developed near us. So it'll become more and more unsettled as the weekend goes on, with showers and thunderstorms Sunday and Monday. Tomorrow, rain for parts of the east coast. Showers and thunderstorms will bring up 80 mils of rain to Brisbane and 25 in Sydney. Canberra and Hobart will be partly cloudy. In Adelaide, mostly sunny, humid in Perth. Back home, showers and thunderstorms will spring up mostly around the ranges tomorrow. Sunday, they'll be more widespread across central and eastern parts. And Monday, much of the state is in for a good drink. Tomorrow, we could get some morning showers near the coast and over the Gippsland ranges. The smoke haze will head back into central areas with a light to moderate easterly wind. On the bays, east to south easterlies at 15 to 25 knots, 30 knots in the evening. Strong winds on Port Phillip, the west and central coasts. Mostly clear in Melbourne tonight and mostly sunny tomorrow, but some smoke haze will be back as well. It shouldn't be as bad as early this week. A slight chance of an afternoon storm over our outer north and east. 15 overnight, 29 the high tomorrow. Sticky on Sunday with a few afternoon and evening showers and storms. A north wind tending southerly, 28. Monday still humid, another 6 to 15 mils of rain with showers and storms, 21. Tuesday a morning shower or two. Wednesday's the warm one, 31 before a late change. Thursday a few morning showers and partly cloudy next Friday. And that's it from the news team here at South Bank. Thanks very much for your company. Join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.